all set up. I'm going to do a live stream. I'm going to put this system together and chat about it. So if you can't hear me, let me know. If you can't hear the music, let me know. If you can't see the picture, there's probably something wrong on your end. I don't know. Otherwise, if you have any questions for me, feel free to fire away in the chat as I try to figure out what I'm going to do with this system. I'm kind of sick of using the 420. I think it's too big for what I want to do. After playing with Herman this past Wednesday, which you could watch. Oh, my voice is a bit low. All right. I can turn it up. I can turn the music down. Maybe. I feel like that did the opposite of what I wanted it to do. How's that? Is that better? Hope so. Good. Anyway, oh, I forgot to put up on the screen what we're listening to here. We're listening to Sean Holt, and he deserves some credit for that, so I will put it up on the screen. Take me a minute. Stuff. There we go. Stick that down there. All right. Okay, let me explain what I'm trying to do. I have this 208 here, which I want to set up to perform with. I performed with Herman this past Wednesday, and it was an absolute blast. And I just had the Voltage Research Lab with me, and that was kind of perfect. I also had the Synthrix, the Erica Synth Synthrix, but as far as modular, when I only had the Voltage Research Lab, and I had so much fun with this limited setup that I thought, well, when I came home and saw the giant 420 sitting on my desk, I thought, oh, I just want less. So I decided to pull out a 208. It was the 208 that was sitting behind me on the shelf here forever that had all the Livewire modules in it. And I thought, I'm going to build a system with just that and try that for a little bit and see what I think. I don't have any cases that are smaller than that. So, other than, I guess, the Voltage Research Lab case, but that case is really small. So I'm going to try to put something together here. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but we'll see how it goes. I think if I use a Voltage Lab and an SV1, that covers the majority of what I want, sound-wise, but I don't know where I want them yet. Typically, I have the voices up top like this, but I think maybe if I stick them side by side like that, and I'm kind of interested in playing with some effects and some prototype stuff, like this guy. Let's see if I can. There we go. Snakes. This is a the sequencer. percussion sequencer 1. I've got to obviously have to have a local florist in there. Off to the side here, I'm going to keep leaning over is where I have the 420 that I'm pulling stuff out of. This is the Flamingo, so this obviously has to be in there. But I'm not sure kind of what else I need. Maybe a touch controller? What I was thinking is maybe a touch controller and then a quantizer. I have a dope for quantizer. That's funny. I have a dope for quantizer at the shop that I could throw in, and that would give me some quantized synth action. Or I could put the sequencer in there too. I'm not really sure. I'm definitely interested right now in something that's maybe a little bit more pitched. So I want something that I can get actual notes out of, and the touch controller, that's not really its strong suit. It's very good at microtonal or experimental or non-pitched voltage output, but to do specific voltages is problematic. I don't think I want to put the cascading delay in there, Jason, because I have this whole pedal board that has a couple different delays in it that I think I'm going to use. So I don't want to go crazy with the delays because I have so many delay pedals. Oh, a KB1, Yotis. I haven't even thought of a KB1. I don't have one here, though. I have one at work. I guess I could save a spot. That's something I could put the touch controller in there and then swap it out with the KB1. That's a great idea. The KB1 is pitched, and it would do everything I would like it to do. Yeah, probably an LPG as well. Oh, well, here's a question for you guys in the chat room. I'm currently working on the Safari Series 3. Now, I know Series 2 isn't out yet, but I'm working on Series 3. And at the shop, because we've been doing a bunch of cleanup because the guys that do our wood, they've moved their shop into our essential storage room in the basement of our building. And so we've had to move a lot of our storage up. We've had to throw away a lot of stuff, just garbage stuff, and move the rest of it up into our shop. So we've been finding all these weird, strange, old, broken, sometimes interesting things. And one thing we found was we found a box that had 104 Vactrols in it. These are Vactrols that we bought before once we learned they were going to be discontinued. We bought as many as we could. We did one more run of the low pass gate module, and then we still had 104. We thought, oh, down the road we may do something with these in the future, and then totally lost them. But I found this box of Vactrols the other day, so I was thinking of doing a Safari version of the low pass gate, which it wouldn't be really any different than the low pass gate module, other than it would have a ridiculous animal theme to it. Oh, hi, Danielle. So if another run of low pass gates with an animal theme would be interesting, let me know in the comments. I'm thinking about it. I drew it up as a llama, I think. Yes, it's a llama. And it'll sound, if you've heard the low pass, it'll sound exactly the same. I'm going to use the same exact circuit. There'll be one tweak to, it'll have a button instead of a switch kind of thing, because I'm trying to move on from switches, but so it'll have a button. But other than that, it'll be the same thing. There'll be 100 of them, or, well, probably a little less than 100, because by the time you test all the Vactrols, not all 104 are going to pass, because that's sort of the beauty of Vactrols, is out of 104, we might get 90 that work is probably a reasonable amount. And they'll all be slightly, you know, just like the last batch of, they'll all be a little bit different here and there, but that'll be it. So it'll be a limited run, but that's kind of the point, I think, of the Safari modules anyway. And I'm drawing them up to test out some new components. So the new knobs, you know, we would use the new knobs for them, and some different pots, and you know, just a couple different parts here and there as we sort of the llama pass gate. That's funny. So as we sort of transition to this new stuff, because the Safari Series 2 is the last of the sort of parts. The whole reason I started the Safari series was to sort of work through this surplus of parts I had sitting around. And the Series 2 gets me through the rest of those. It gets me through the rest of the sliders. It gets me through the rest of the buttons. It gets me through the rest of the trimmer pots. So Series 3 will be sort of a different thing, but I thought it might be fun. So anyway, it seems like you guys agree, which is cool. I was thinking of doing a sort of Series 3 would be 3 versions of the same module. So it would be the low pass gate would be sort of the classic, you know, the Don Buchla inspired circuit, and then it would be a single dynamics controller module that is sort of the modern version of the low pass gate. And then I thought the third module would be maybe a kick drum module based off of the dynamics controller, but hyper sort of tweaked and focused on making an interesting kick drum sound. So that's kind of the idea for the third series. We'll see how it goes. That kick drum may or may not happen. We've been playing with that for a while now, with moderate levels of success. The problem with doing the kick drum as a standalone module is it's not as universal as you want it to be. So it's, you know, it's hard to change the pitch of it, you know, things like that. So we're trying to work through those, and if we can, we'll do a module, and if not, you know, we'll move on with our lives. So so anyway, that's out there. Those are the thing. That Series 2 is only going to be the 2 modules. It's going to be the snakes and the flamingo. Absolutely worth it, though. Yeah, so anyway, back to my case here. I'm still trying to figure out what this thing is supposed to be. I need the snakes in here because the firmware's not finished, so I have to finish that. And I need the flamingo in here because it sounds really cool and I want to keep playing with it. And I'm obviously going to have to do some videos on it so you guys know what's going on. I don't know if I could do a Safari chain reactor. That's based on the Vilfo module, which is the first module I designed all those years ago. And the point of the Safari series is to really test new things and try out what we're working on now in small batches, so that when it goes into the synthesizers we're working on, we're confident that it's exactly what we want it to be, and limit our designing on that end. So it's a way for us to share a little bit of what we're working on, but at the same time, it allows us to test some things before it goes into the bigger instruments. And unfortunately, I don't think the chain reactor really falls into any of those categories currently. Who knows about the future, though? You never know. So let's see what we have here. We have obviously the SV1, which is, you know, it's going to have your 2 oscillators, a mixer, filter, an ADSR, a VCA, LFO. I've got 2 dynamics controllers in the voltage lab, a couple oscillators here. Boy, maybe that's just the system. Maybe the system is these 2 things in a voltage research lab case. No, that's not fun. I want a little bit more to play with than that, because then you need a mixer. I need a way to get them all together. So as soon as you add a mixer, obviously nothing fits at that point. I do have an external 6-channel mixer that I'm using in these live shows. So that will be the mixer. So I don't think I need my the performance mixer that I had in the case. I know what I need. I need a couple of these. A couple Gibbons. A Crow. I pulled out local florist. I have 2 local florists, personally. And I totally forgot that one of them is actually a prototype. I don't know if I've showed this before. But... oh, come on. Focus. No? Yeah, there you go. You can see there is an op amp hanging off the back of it. This is, I think the second prototype of this circuit. And there was just one thing that just needed to buffer, and I didn't have an extra op amp on there, so this one is hanging off. Oh, there's also a resistor dangling down here. And that's fine, but I'm kind of bummed because I forgot. I thought I had 2 production modules, but I don't. I only have 1. That's okay. Oh, I need a chain reactor in this case. Ooh, maybe. That's a lot of modulation. Modulation is good. As I'm pulling these modules out of this 420 over here, some of them are really gross. I had no idea. It gets so dusty down here. And I try to dust everything. I have a duster that I bought at IKEA that I run over everything, but it just doesn't last. I want to thank again as we switch to another Sean Holt album here. I want to thank Sean Holt, who I don't know if he's in the chat or not, but thank him for not complaining when I use his music on these. I love his music. I love listening to it, and he doesn't seem to mind. And hopefully, when I play it, you guys go check out his Bandcamp. Maybe buy an album or 2. I'm sure he would appreciate it. And his music is super cool, like I've said. I've bought his full discography, so I feel like maybe that's trying to do my part. Okay, so I have my chain reactor. Reverb is kind of like the delays. I don't want to... I have a couple delay pedals that are going to be in the pedal board, or a couple reverb pedals that are going to be in the pedal board. I have the Evenside Black Hole, and I have the Electro Harmonics Canyon, which is like a delay, but it has a reverb settings in it as well. That sounds really cool. So I feel like I have the effects mostly covered in there. So, because I can fill this entire thing with effects easily. It would be super fun, but I think that I can take care of that in the pedal board. At least that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to incorporate this pedal board in my performance. The idea is to have a smaller system and maybe have a modular system and then some other smaller instrument and keep the tracks down to a minimum. I tend to, a lot of times when I'm playing with Herman, especially when we're doing these sort of jam sessions, is more is better. Like, oh, it doesn't sound great, so just add another sound on top of it and it'll sound better. But it never does. If I could focus instead on, well, let's just make 1 or 2 sounds, 1 or 2 tracks running at the same time sound good, then I think that's a better way to go about it. So I'm trying to set up something now that focuses on that. That said, I definitely need a local florist in here, and I do have 2 analog delays. So I'm just full of shit, but that's all right. Another thing is I do have a couple more oscillators that are going to be in here in a couple weeks. couple other modules that are going to be in here, but so this isn't a long-term case, unfortunately. That's what I was thinking, that the controllers would do really well in the Nifty case. I could put the touch controller and the KB1 in there, and that would be a cool way of going about it. But that's a totally separate... I haven't decided on what controller I want to use yet. I would wish if I had like a larger scale sequencer that I could use to sort of control everything at once. I don't have that. So, I have, like I have a key step and I have a beat step. I'm not a big fan of using those to jam with. They're great for when I'm recording. I'm using a DAW and I'm doing one track at a time. But to jam with, they don't really match my workflow. So, not sure what that is yet. I also have a Novation thing that I use quite a bit. One of those, I can't remember what it's called. It's a big grid of buttons. And that has a couple sequencers built into it, but I haven't found the sequencer side of it terribly deep or intuitive, especially when you're jamming. But as a controller, as a MIDI controller, it would be great that I could just I have MIDI built into these, so I could use it like that. That wouldn't be a problem. So I don't know. As I go through the 420, I thought this was going to be impossible. I'm like, oh, what am I going to fill this with? How am I going to decide what to not put in here? But as I now look at my 420 and I have taken out a few of the modules, I'm like, well, maybe I don't need anything else, but I absolutely do. I'm just not sure what that is yet. I think this has to be in here. I do. But maybe because all the jacks and shit are on the right-hand side, maybe it goes over here. Maybe that goes there. I don't have any mixers in the 420 other than the big mixer. I have a mixed malt. So that's shaping up nicely. Maybe one more crow. Here's another crow. Oh, I have this mixer. What am I thinking? I have another one of those too. That's much better choice than the mixed malt. That could be a good output. The problem with the giraffe, and this is for any attenuverting mixer, as I'm sure you guys have used attenuverting mixers, you know, the sort of downfall of attenuverters is it's difficult to find the 0 point. And that's just sort of part of the design. One of the issues, the pots are 20% pots. So that means there's a 20% drift, or that can be tolerance in the pot. So the 0 point very rarely is exactly 12 o'clock. It's usually around there, but it's never precise, and you have to sort of hunt around to find the off point. And that's kind of why I've never done attenuverters in the past on mixer, because I've always thought, well, it's not precise enough for me, or it's not clean enough for me. But I always found like I need one, because every now and then you want to flip something upside down, and I never had a module that would do that. So that's why the Giraffe came to be, and it turned out to be terribly handy. But like all attenuverting mixers, it suffers from, there's really no off. So the solution that I've been using, and I've just been pulling out the jack when I want to shut off the sound, and that works, but I guess it is what it is. But it's one of those modules that, in the grand scheme of a system, it makes a lot of sense to have, because it does solve a bunch of little problems in your system, but it's not a jack-of-all-trades kind of mixer, I don't think. For me, anyway. I guess it is a jack-of-all-trades. It's just the fact that you can't find the off, sometimes it drives me crazy. That says I've been using them like mad. I've got another one up here. So I guess if I have my percussion sequencer here, it should be down in this bottom row too, next to this guy. I typically like to keep my performance UI on the bottom row where my hands are. I don't know if this chain reactor is going to make the cut. It's pretty big and I'm running out of space. Yeah, there's a 20% variance on all potentiometers, unless you get really, really expensive potentiometers. You can find them that are 10, 5%, but the price goes up exponentially. Most alpha pots that everybody uses in Eurorack are all 20% pots. So it's not specific to the trimmer pots. It's a potentiometer issue. Sliders are the same way. They're 20%. It's just kind of the standard. It is what it is. Because you're dealing with sort of carbon pads and, you know, dragging a contact across them, essentially determining where on the, you know, resistance line you're going to drag from it. There's some variance there. So I'm going to throw, I don't know if I have a room for low pass gate. See, when I use this, I guess I will. If I'm going to be testing this, I'm going to want a kick drum. So, although I can, they don't do it quite as, the Voltage Lab ones don't really do the kick sound. So, I only have, so this, we're going to take this out temporarily. It may go back, it may not. So there's our kick sound. Kick. You know what? Let me stick this. Oh no, that module's gone forever. Stick these guys together. I think that might be a good team. Looks like I have 10 HP left. Low pass gate and a game system instead of the chain reactor. I don't have a game system here. At one point I had a shelf over to the right here that had, I probably had 100 modules sitting on the shelf. But as my little COVID bunker studio kept getting more and more elaborate, I kept more and more shit kept collecting down here. So at one point I took a ton of it back to work and put it on the shelves there where it could just be out of the way. So I don't really have a whole lot of modules. And Game System is one that I had 2 of them here. I took them both back to the shop. And I actually built a system, which I'm going to show in a video at some point once I screw everything in and test it all. I'm kind of all the Lifeforms modules. So I built a 344, filled it with Lifeforms, the silver panel Lifeforms. And it's beautiful. I just have to go through now because these are all, I found all the original prototypes and maybe first run production modules, the earliest ones I could find. And I put them in there. It looks really great. So now I have to go through and test each module and calibrate each module just to make sure. Because a lot of the stuff, again, is prototypes that's been sitting around for years, haven't been used. I don't know what state they were in when we left them. So, but once I have that, I'm gonna set up something interesting. No, I'm drinking tea. Tea. It's Irish breakfast tea. It's tasty. I wouldn't mind having a ring mod. I think I have a ring sitting here somewhere. Yes, here it is. Here's a module I don't use very often. Ring mod. This is a module that I was really excited to come out with. This is a long time ago, you can tell because it's the old Dymo font. And we only ended up doing 1 run of them because they just didn't sell at all, which I thought was kind of crazy. And Michael Johnson, our designer, at one point, before we had this module, he said, I don't know if I could be a part of a modular company or synth company that doesn't have a ring mod. Because it is such an essential, quintessential centerpiece of synthesis, and I think it's really underappreciated. But it's one of those sounds that kind of fell out of favor and just, it hasn't made its way back in yet. So, you know, we snuck one into the Voltage Lab. We've snuck one into the Voltage Lab 2. We've snuck it in a little bit different way in the Voltage Lab 2, but we put it in there because I think it's important, and I think it sounds really neat. Unfortunately, it's not that sort of cool sound that sells instruments, so we kind of have to sneak it in, but we'll be in there. But I think I might leave this in here because the one in the Voltage Lab, you can't, it's just the second oscillator and the first oscillator here. I can't tie any of this in, but if I have this module, I could do some interesting things. And you can use it, you know, it will work if you have a modulation source or a DCC. You could use it as a VCA. That's fine. It does a great job at that. Especially this mod module, because you can switch how it's wired behind the scenes and get a couple different sounds out of it, which is cool. All of them are still ring mod in their design. It's just kind of different vibe. And then with the mix, you can bring the dry X back in. And the reason I put that in there originally, and it's not as true to the pure ring mod, but what it does is bringing the X back in. As you blend that in with the ring modded sound, it brings that low end back. So the low end that a ring mod can typically suck out of a sound, this will pop that back in there, which is nice. Because before when I would just do ring mods, before I had this module, I had another, I can't remember, it was probably a dope for a ring mod. Or no, this is back when I was using my synthesizers.com setup. I would always take whatever I had patched into the X and take the output of the ring mod and put them into the mixer and then go on, just to boost that low end again. So this was a way of doing it all, kind of all in one module. You're out of touch with your ring mod. See, you really need to get to know your ring mod. It's an interesting module, and it's because it's been around since the beginning. It's worth experimenting with, especially if you're trying to do sort of noisy, clangy sounds, or you need an extra VCA, or you just want to create maybe something that's a little bit different. Percussive sounds sound fantastic through a ring mod. Try it out. Experiment. Play with ring mods. Chase has the right idea. I love ring mods too. That would be a nice t-shirt. I love ring mods. Oh, speaking of t-shirts, I've ordered a bunch of t-shirts. So it's been a long time since Pittsburgh Modulars had new t-shirts. Typically, we bought t-shirts every year to go to Super Booth. Wasn't a Super Booth this past year, so we didn't order any t-shirts. So it's basically been 2 years since we've had new t-shirts. In the next, I think next week, we should have them in. I have 6 new designs. They're available in a bunch of sizes. Each design, a couple of them are on black t-shirts, but a couple of them are on different color t-shirts for those who don't want black t-shirts, so I don't know why you wouldn't want all black t-shirts. But if you don't, there's some of the t-shirts come on different color t-shirts. So if you want a Pittsburgh Modular t-shirt, you'll be able to get one. If not, you can watch me wear them. Because really, this just, I only wear Pittsburgh Modular t-shirts, as you may imagine. And I needed new t-shirts is what sort of spurred this on. Dual ring with symbiotic waves. There you go. That's a blast from the past. I did at one point have a dual ring mod here, and I took it back to the shop. It was in the 420, I think, for one live stream. And I only used half of it, so I took it out and I brought the other one back in. And then I never used it, so there you go. And symbiotic waves, I'm not going to put the symbiotic waves in here. It's too big. And what I found with the symbiotic waves and with the digital double helix is that they sound really good kind of in their own world, but they don't flow with the rest of my sounds as well as maybe I would want them to. So I think maybe a little system with just those in it would be super cool. Maybe. But this case, I only have so much room, and I want it to be mildly interesting for me. I think I clearly have sequencing under control now. I have a voice. I have another voice. This one could be a percussive voice. I have a percussion here. I have this delay here, which most likely will get tied to the SV1 in use, so I might as well put those guys next to each other. These will probably play together. A couple mixers in here. I do need a buffered malt. The clock source that we use, coming from Herman's case, it does not like to not be buffered. So I do need a buffered malt just for the clock. So that would be that. Sample and hold. I have actually 2 sample and holds in here, although that's a sample and hold's always a great call. Chase, I have a sample and hold and noise source in the SV1B, and I have a sample and hold noise source in the voltage lab. They're exactly the same circuits, and just in actually they're exactly the same circuit. I copied the SV1B circuit and pasted it into the schematics of the voltage lab. And that's how it stayed, because it sounds good to me. And that's what I went with. Wow, Brian, your 4th module approach was a delay. That's the kind of decision I'd like to hear. If I could have all delays, just delays, that's what I would do. I'm a delay freak. But like I said, I'm trying to do less effects in here because I have an effects pedal board that I want to incorporate into this particular setup. So I'm trying to keep this to actual synthesis, although I'm not doing a good job because I do have a delay here, there's a delay here. I need to get this local florist back in here, so something's got to give. I probably only need one of these giraffes. I think that's fair. Maybe the ring mod has to go. See, this is what happens every time. But I want to experiment with that. Maybe I'll annex. Just tape this onto the side. Probably. Probably get away with a single crow. Although I never have enough filters, ever. So if I take this out, I'm down to 2 filters plus the 2 dynamics controllers. I don't know if that's enough. Yodas, I think you're right, and that's a great choice, but the whole point of this exercise is to kind of try to do it small and try to minimize what I have. So if I can have my controller in here as well, because I'm going to have another synthesizer and a pedal board. So I feel like that is as much stuff as I want. I don't want a second Eurorack case, because otherwise I could just keep it in the 420, or I could even use like a 360, get another row. So I really want to try to do it here, and I know this is a huge module, but if this is running both of these, or one of these and the other synthesizer, then this is running some sort of percussion sound. Cut holes in the case and mount more. I could use a bigger case. The point is try to do it small. I feel like I can make interesting music with a 208, and that's what I'm trying to do here. Obviously, with these 2 instruments in here, along with a ridiculous sequencer, that's a lot of power. And so it's just this sort of annex of extra stuff. What is it? And how does it work? So if I have this music's very dramatic. Oh, no. Yeah, I know Herman does the beats, so I don't really need the kick. And I think, although every now and then I poke in with some sounds, and the other purpose of this is I am testing the firmware in Snakes, so I need some percussive sound. So I will use the kick drum there, because for testing the Snakes, I can make a kick drum, and then I can make a percussive sound with the Voltage Lab, and I'm good there. Although I could probably make a kick sound with the SV1B as well. I know I did that on a live stream a while back, and I thought it sounded really good. So maybe that's the way to go. So maybe this guy comes out. But if we take out that kick, or the low-pass gate, do we really need 2 crows? Because we have S1B, which has its own filter, although it's not, it doesn't do what the crow does. At the core, it's the Pittsburgh filter, so at the core, it's the same filter. Yeah, I can always use 2 filters. What am I saying? obviously need 2 Gibbons because I like random, and that's 4 random sources, which is super good. I agree with you. I think the low pass gate's going to have to come back in. I do. Feels a little weird without it. This is a big sequencer for this case, but think of it as 2 16-step sequencers, which is how I use it 99% of the time. So you have 1 16-step sequencer for this guy, 1 16-step sequencer for this guy, or you have one of these running one of these, and then another 16-step running an external synth via MIDI, because this does have MIDI as well. I think it earns its place here, certainly until I have something to replace it, because I perform with this and I jam with this all the time, so I need something to jam with. I'm trying to be a little more melodic, and so I need something, and this at least keeps me in that realm, because I can use the MIDI out to control this, and then it's nice and pitched. And nice and easy to use. So for now, I think that's gonna stay. So this might be it. I think what I just need to do is screw everything in and play with it a little bit before, because I'm sure once I play around with it a little bit, I'm gonna be like, oh, well, clearly I need this or I need that. I'll probably end up needing a 2+2 mixer in here. I don't know if the Giraffe will ultimately do everything I need it to do. I always end up not putting enough mixers in cases, and I use mixers all the time. So I may need this plus a 2+2 mixer, in which case I don't know what I'll do. Just give up. But you're welcome to reverse engineer it. It's actually, the circuitry of it's not that complicated, and since I never finished the software, that's not that complicated either. I wish I could just power it on and patch it up, but there's they're not connected. So now I have to actually put it together. One row at a time. So for those of us who, I don't know how many of us there are out there, but for those of us who enjoy sliding nuts, I've always felt a malt is a great way to get things where you want them to be. Stick that right there. Multi-shop mixer. What is the multi-shop mixer? Pull out the delay and use the pedal board for the delay. Yeah, you're right. That's probably 6 HP that I could use somewhere else. A little smarter. And I have the delay built into the voltage lab. And on the pedal board, I think the pedal board has 4 delays on it, so it's not like I'm Starved for delay. Ooh, a magnetic wand. I never thought of that. Oh, you may have just changed my life, Chase. Oh, I'll have to get my... Ooh. Oh, it doesn't work. It's not magnetic. I have something at the shop, though. I'm going to try that tomorrow. Brilliant. Well, I can ditch the delay, and I still have the delay in the voltage lab, and it's the same circuit, it's the same delay. So I can use it, you know, it's like having a delay in the case, but I think you're right. I think the delay, I think it's got to go. I have the local florist in here, so if I need echo, I've got it. If I start getting the echo shakes, I've got something in there. Because I use the Gibbons. No, I gotta keep the touch controller. Everything down here. So let's go in. Oh. Now, Chase, you've broken my heart. It's a roller coaster of emotions. I'm just happy that despite all the odds, this sequencer continues to work. Typically, our hand-built samples that we drag around the earth don't have terribly large shelf life, but this one has. It's been a good team player. And it has been a lot of inspiration for the sequencer in the voltage lab too, which, if you could think of something that would be half touch controller of the voltage lab and half this sort of joined together, or if the touch controller and this kind of melted together into something that's what'll be in the voltage lab too. So it has been inspiring, and it has created something that I think is ultimately way better, because as interesting as this thing looks, it's deeply flawed in its sort of philosophy, and certainly its UI. The UI on this thing is not great. But what it allowed me to do is experiment and find what did work and what did make sense, and do something interesting. So ultimately, it was not a failed experiment, but certainly a failed idea for a single retail product. But that's okay. I have failed retail product experiments all the time. What sort of quantity exists with the sequencer that will not be? There is two of them. I may have the other one here. Hold on. No, it's at work. There's two of them. There's one of these, which is the original design. And then there was a Rev 2 that solved a lot of these problems, but ultimately ended up being way too expensive to manufacture. The Rev 2, I've used it in 1 or 2 videos. It has a white panel. It's just a white PCB or PVC panel. So it's, I have to remember what all the buttons do because there's no printing on it. So for that reason alone, I use this one, but the other one's a little bit easier to use it, and the code was nearly finished in that one. This code's only about half done. But I like this one more because it has a finished panel. So those are the only two. I handmade each one of them. I think I handmade 2 of the white one, but one of them, I think I dropped or something at some point, and it was just got all smashed up. So, so really, this is the only working one. The white one works-ish. It has a couple issues. If you touch it wrong, sometimes it'll reset, which is awkward. But this one seems to be pretty solid, so that's why I use this one. But this is it. This is the only one. There'll be plenty of the new one in the voltage lab, though, so it will make it. Yeah, this... And ultimately with these prototypes, especially the prototypes that have a lot of digital circuitry or digital code in them, they're never finished. Like, if it was finished, I don't finish them unless I know they're going to be used. Like this, the code's not finished in this yet, but I will finish it. This one, the code for the stuff that I use at this point works, but sort of a lot of the stranger functions and like things like saving screenshots and things like that, none of that was ever finished. So kind of it lives in its half-finished world. The only problem with using this thing is every time you turn it on, it's like the first time it's ever been turned on. It has no internal saving at all. So if you have a pattern on here and you turn it off and turn it back on, it's going to go back to sort of factory reset. And that's fine. And I do that for a specific reason while I'm coding. I don't have it save anything because as I'm coding things, I want to be able to solve problems. And I want to be able to start fresh. So it just wipes itself every time, which is great, but I'm obviously not coding this anymore. So it'll live like this until I have something to replace it. Okay, so I have, now that I've taken out the delay, I do have 6 HP up in this top row, but let's get some of this stuff. I don't need this ridiculously long cable. I spent an afternoon at the shop a couple months ago and made myself 12 ridiculously long power ribbon cables for use in my 360. Because it's upside down, I don't know if that really has anything to do with it, but I felt like I was swapping stuff in and out all the time, and I would have to take 2 or 3 modules out to do the power because the power cords are like kind of just long enough. And if you have a 360, you understand what I mean. Or a 420, I mean, you understand what I mean. So I made myself a bunch of overly long cables to solve that problem. But for any other case, they seem silly. The snakes and the flamingo are next. They are going into production hopefully this week. I have one more sort of pre-production bit I have to do for them, which assuming I can accomplish more this week than I did last week. They should go in towards the end of this week for production, and then, you know, we're 6 weeks in production, and then we have to bring them here and test them and calibrate them and put the panels on. The panels are already in production. I sent them in a few weeks ago, but the PCBs are not. But so we're a couple months away from having those out. Like I said at the beginning of the live stream when I was talking about those, I'm working on Series 3, the design side of that, and sort of determining what those will be and how that's going to work. Because the whole point of one of the reasons why I did the Safari series in the way that I did was to use up a lot of the UI that I've had sort of sitting around the shop that going forward I'm not going to need. Like sliders and these trimmer pots. Series and these LED buttons. Series 2 will use up the rest of those, so I don't have any more of those. So Series 3 is going to be sort of a little bit different knob stuff. Take the time to calibrate the heck out of the flamingos. That's the beauty of these things. They don't... There's no calibration. Here it is. Here's the rear. There's no... We don't have to calibrate anything. They're so well designed by Nicol that they just do what they're supposed to do. Absolute brilliant engineering in these things. Clay asks, do I have modules in mind for Series 3, or is it exploration that will evolve as I tinker? Series 3, I talked about this earlier, but I'm happy to repeat myself. I think we've been doing a lot of cleanup at the shop because we've had the team that does the woodwork for our cases has moved into our storage facility in the basement. They've taken that over with all their ridiculous machines. So we've had to move all of our storage stuff up into our shop. And because of that, we've been, going through old boxes and throwing a lot of stuff away and finding things that we had forgot about. One of the things I found was a box with 104 Vactrals in it. Now these are ones that we bought for low pass gates, and we ended up not doing. We just figured, we'll just save these for later. We'll do something with them. So I think we are, yes, the Llama Pass Gate. I think what we're going to do is we're going to do one more run of the original low pass gate. This low pass gate here, except we are going to safarify it. It'll be the Llama Pass Gate. We're going to do it as a llama. I already have the panel drawn up. It's beautiful. It's 8 HP, just like this one. There was no way to get it any smaller. So it's 8 HP because I wanted to use a large knob on it. And you can't fit that on 6. So we only have 104 Vactrals. And out of those, because we haven't tested them yet, we'll probably get about 90 that are good enough to be in the low pass gate, and the rest will be probably way too short. And then we'll probably have 1 or 2 that are super long, and they'll be awkwardly long. And by short or long, I'm talking about the decay time. When you pluck it, You want something in the 200 to 400 millisecond range. Anything shorter than that, it kind of doesn't have that magic that you're looking for. And anything longer, you run in the risk of it just never closes. So because of that. Oh, by the way, you're welcome to swear in the chat, but just understand that I have to approve it before it goes up. And if I don't see it, it's never going to get shown. So that's your decision, and I will respect it. But anyway, yeah, so we're going to do it. We'll probably have about 90 of them once they're available. And then I was thinking, so that would be the first in the series, and then the second would be the dynamic controller from the Voltage Lab, which has really become sort of one of the centerpieces of what is the modern Pittsburgh sound. And I haven't done a standalone Eurorack module with that yet. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to have sort of the old school Don Buchla inspired low pass gate with the modern version, which is the Vectorless Dynamics controller. I think that would make a nice series of Safari modules. And then the third in that series would be Michael and I have been working on a kick drum based on the kick drum sound that we get with this thing that, you know, you hear Herman perform with all the time, and you hear me use it all the time as a kick drum. Sounds amazing. But I wanted to do it in one module where, you know, you have all the bits you need, because, you know, 2 modules for a kick drum, that's crazy. So we drew one up, and I had a prototype, and the prototype is, well, it might be here. Hold on. No, it's not. I don't know why I keep thinking things are here when they're obviously at work. But we are working on a kick drum module based on the dynamics controller that is specific to that. Now, one of the things we ran into though is if, you know, you do a kick drum off of this sound, it's great, but it's not terribly flexible. It kind of makes that sound, and that sounds great, but we wanted to do something that's maybe a little bit more versatile than that. So we had some ideas, and we've been experimenting. We're on the second version of the prototype now. And that's, we have some PCBs coming to test for that. So we'll see. But that's the idea for the Series 3 would be 3 versions of this same circuit, sort of the 3 generations, or I guess the kick drum would be not really a generation, but its own thing, but 3 uses or interpretations of this beautiful circuit that Don Buchla started working on so long ago, and really show that you can do some really interesting modern things with his original idea. And even though less and less of the circuitry is really based on what he did, the inspiration is very much there, and you can hear it in it. And that's really interesting to me. And so that's probably where Series 3 is going to go. It's going to be at least 2 of those, maybe the kick drum as well, again, if we get it really dialed in and as versatile as we're trying to do. If not, we'll hold off until it is, because we're going to get it right. And it'll be cool. But in the meantime, low pass gates all around for kick drums, because they are a great way to do it. So I didn't really think about the layout. Very much here. I think I'm going to throw throw in a couple of these guys right in the middle. So I'm going to use these gibbons. I could use these gibbons as the sequencer sources and run an entire patch off of just these two gibbons. On Thursday at the shop, I was asking Perry how many we had left because I was eyeing up a third for myself. So I wanted to make sure that there was after we sold out of what's available, there was going to be another one left for me sitting on the shelf. Finish your LPG kit. Low-pass gate's a really special, really interesting circuit. A little misunderstood, and I think it's explained poorly by a lot of people, because the easy way to explain a low-pass gate is you have a VCA and you have a low-pass filter, and then you have a third mode, which is both, where you have the functionality of the VCA and the low-pass filter together. The reality of it is, it's three distinct things going on. The VCA and the filter are never entwined in any way. The both mode isn't both at all. The both mode is a filter in its own right. So low-pass gate mode is really a filter. And that is why, certainly in the Don Buchla interpretation, the classic interpretation, it's not even fair calling it an interpretation. In Don Buchla's circuit, the low-pass gate, in both mode, the circuit doesn't close the whole way. There's a bleed, and the bleed is because it's a filter and it doesn't cut everything off. There's always a little bit of sound there, but that's okay because it's one of those things. It's classic. We were able to work around that for the most part with our low-pass gate module. We also added resonance, which was never in the original, to the filter mode. Resonance only ever works in filter mode. Because that's the only second order filter in the circuit. So we pull the internal bandpass is what you use to create the resonance. And if you don't know the low-pass gate, the filter circuit in there, the filter core is what's called a Salin key filter. And if you're familiar with Korg synthesizers at all, and I suspect if you're listening to me jibber jabber on that you probably are, the Korg MS-20 filter core is also a Salin key filter. So you can, if you use the low-pass gate in filter mode, you can hear a lot of similarities in how the filter is really smooth and really a mellow filter almost. But, and this is sort of the Jekyll and Hyde aspect of it, the resonance circuit, because there's sort of no natural bandpass in there, or no obvious bandpass to pull to create the resonance. You have to sort of find different ways to create that on your own. And the way Korg did and the way a lot of people do it, what you end up with is just an incredibly strong and angry resonance. We tamed it down. We used a different resonance circuit in ours that Michael came up with, but it's still, you end up with a very strong resonance curve that you have to really fight to get a usable range of resonance before it just loses its mind and self-oscillates. So on that side of it, it's an interesting circuit to sort of fight with from a design standpoint. But I think the results of the arguments have certainly been worth it. Oh, Numerous, was that you? Oh, nice. Yeah, I'm glad you got it. That's cool. I absolutely adore the local florist circuit. It's sort of I love that it's a chorus circuit that's just kind of, it found its own voice in such an interesting way. And I think it comes down to, and I was doing some research on this last night. This is how I spend my Saturday nights. And I was comparing this to, I have this sort of obsession with 1980s DoD guitar pedals. And so I was comparing the schematic of the local florist to the schematic for the DoD 65, I think it is, or 68. I don't know, the Super Course. And they use the same chips, essentially, the same delay chips in them. And the basic audio path is very similar. We added a little bit, ours is a little bit more complicated because we didn't have access to the same delay chips that they used in those classic pedals. They use the Panasonic chips, which they have a higher bandwidth in them because they run on a higher voltage. They run on 9 volts where these do not. So because of that, we have to be a lot more careful with the audio that goes through. We have to condition it a lot more because we have less bandwidth to try to get the same sound quality out. And you could argue based on the analog delay and this, how well we succeed at that, but it kind of is what it is. Those Panasonic chips really aren't available in quantity and price anymore, and I'm not a big fan of doing new old stock very often. So, but anyway, but other than the signal path, which, there was some exceptions made to clean it up for various reasons, but that shouldn't really affect the sound too much. It's really, the difference is how the sounds are mixed at the end and how the output is. And it was fascinating to look at that circuit and see how they did it. And it's sort of it's a very simple kind of brute force approach to mixing these signals, and they're playing with phase, and they're also playing obviously with delay, and the combination of playing with phase and delay and inversion creates the sound that they have. And the way we did it is very different than that, and what you end up in the end is something that sounds entirely different, even though the audio signal path for the first 95% of the circuit is it does the same thing. They're not the same, but the results would be the same. So that I've found just fascinating. I'm sorry, Clay, I missed your question the first time through. I understand the concept of the resonance being feedback from the filter itself, but how does that work for the low pass gate mode and the dynamics controller from the BRL? That's a good question. And I sort of explained that when I was talking about the low pass gates. The dynamics controller is a low pass gate at heart. The audio signal path is an evolution of the low pass gate, but the point is the same. And just like I was talking about the chorus and the florist being, even though the audio signal paths are different, the end result should be the same at the end. We just go about it slightly differently for, various technical reasons. The low pass gate would be the same. So the core idea is the same. The difference is, instead of having that Vactro in there, we have an analog circuit that emulates it. And we tried to emulate it as close as possible because we wanted it to sound the same. Now, obviously we didn't. In the end, it's not exactly the same, but what we've created sort of has its own sound and its own life to it that we were very happy with. So because of that, that VCA circuit is there, and the two filter circuits are there as well. So the Salin key filter core is in the dynamics controller as well, and that's where the resonance is pulled off. Now, when you're in low pass gate mode, or you're in VCA mode, although you don't really hear it as much in VCA mode, in the voltage lab, if you turn the resonance all the way up, you do add sort of a high pitch screaming. It's very mild. Scream's not the right word, but it's feedback. So the filter starts self-oscillating, and what you get then is essentially bleed. It should only be in the filter, or it should only be in the filter mode, but we left it open a little bit so that it bleeds through and you can use it in low pass gate and VCA mode. Like I said, it's less of an effect in VCA mode, but you can absolutely hear it in low pass gate mode. If you turn the resonance all the way up, you get this extra sort of notch or spike in the sound. The reason it's there is because of the way we're switching the audio signals around using analog switching. The way you have to buffer before you go to the switches requires some things, and we purposely left it out because we wanted that little spike there. And that's the reason. But that's the reason why it's there, and it's not in the low pass gate module, is because that's a switch and we didn't have the option to sort of let it bleed a little. But that's the nice thing about having controls. You can do that. You can say, oh, you know what, let's let a little through. Yes, a chirp, Clay. Thank you. Chirp is a perfect word to describe what it does. Yeah, and I use it all the time, especially for percussion stuff. That little chirp is great because it just adds something that your ear just grabs onto it, and it adds like that second tone. Like when you hit a drum, it creates multiple sounds, so it's the combination of those that really gives you percussive sounds that sound alive. And so adding that extra level to it, I don't know, when we were prototyping this, oh boy, 3 years ago now? Oh geez. That was something that I immediately heard, and I was like, oh wait, what's that? But after you use it, you're like, oh yeah, it's better because all you have to do is turn the resonance down and it's gone. So I never felt like it was a bug. It was just one of those things I'm like, well, it shouldn't be there, but if it's there, it's a little better. So I guess it's a feature. Yeah. And that kind of happens all the time. You know, as you're experimenting with this stuff, you decide what works and what's a feature and what's something that it's got to go. And I feel like that's Michael and I's job, is to create a curated set of bits, but make them interesting enough that there's little things like that every now and then you discover. Kind of interesting. Yeah, the analog switching used in here so that we can use buttons instead of mechanical switching like this. They're really picky about the signal coming in, and they can so you really have to buffer them in a specific way, and if you don't, hilarity ensues. Or something like that. Safari. Put the chain reactor right here. Little place it deserves its place in the sun. The chain reactor is an interesting circuit. That was a module. This one's filthy, but that's an interesting module because it was like the Crow. It started as an idea Herman had. And so this, in my mind, has always been called the Herman module because it was the first module that, well, Herman's full of ideas, but that was the first one that I sort of took his idea and ran with it. I'm glad I did because it created an interesting module. The idea that the top two are Vilfos, and then you just have two free running oscillators. And then the influence in how they, a chain reaction sliding up to create weirder and weirder waveforms. It's kind of interesting. But I think like anything, I've worked with this circuit for so long, I've kind of, I don't know, I feel like I've lost interest in it maybe. It's cool, but I've sort of moved on to other things because I'm always sort of working on the next thing. So there's only so much room. Although having this in the 420 case has been really cool, and I have used it quite a bit. Because there's a lot of modulation there. Sometimes you need weird modulation. You don't just want a triangle or a sine wave. You want something a little weird, and that's what the chain reactor just gives you all day long. It's just weird wobbles and strangeness. So I have 6 HP here now that I've taken out the delay. But what goes there? I don't know. I know this doesn't fit, but there probably should be a mixer. I'm going to need a way to get these signals. I guess I could just take them from wherever into the mixer. But I have 6 HP here. I'm not sure what's going to do here. I don't have room for a 2+2. I'm going to count on the gibbon or the giraffe to do my mixing, heavy lifting here. I've got this mixer. I should probably put another giraffe in here. More mixers is probably better, but again, this case is going to be a work in progress. The first time I put a case together, it's never finished right away anyway. It takes a couple days of jamming on it to decide, oh, it needs this, or oh, I got to tweak this a little bit, or I got to take this module out. Sometimes I put modules in, I'm like, oh, this is a great idea to have this module in here, and then I never ever use it. It was interesting when I did the performance for the New York Modular Society. I really wanted to utilize every module in the case, so I kept, as I was designing the performance, I would just put the modules in for that bit, and the other rest of the case was blank until I had filled the case with modules that I used. So I used everything in there. A malt and a giraffe. I feel like that would work. Is that it? Is that the... Yeah, I suppose it is. Oh, you know what? I know what goes in there. It's not this. I know exactly what it is. It's sitting right here. ADSR. And the reason it's an ADSR is because the one bit of the SV1 that if I had to design it again would be a second envelope generator. Almost every time I use this, I'm always like, oh, if I had one more envelope. Obviously, it would have changed the instrument. It wouldn't have worked, but I always like to have a second one ready to go. So when I patch this up, if I want to use the filter, if I want the filter to have its own envelope generator separate from the VCA, I've got it there and I can do it. I've been working with, I have another, at the shop I have an ADSR that I've been playing with. It has a cool feature that I dig a lot. It has two outputs. It has a short output and a long output, which is kind of cool. So they both outputs use the same math from this particular generator. The shop I've been playing with is digital. It uses the same math from the ADSR pots, but it has a short and a long. So the short one is, I can't remember exactly how much shorter it is, but it's short enough that you can run the short version into the filter and the long version into the VCA, and it's just perfect. It sounds really, really cool. So I think for that reason, that's a good reason to have two, but I think this is the module to have in here. I feel like ADSR is one of those modules that no one wants to, why would I have that vanilla module? But it's such a critical part of synthesis in the same way that ring mods are, I would argue that ADSR is even more vanilla and more general purpose, but you can't have enough. And I know there's two envelope or function generators in the voltage lab, but they don't do the same thing. They don't do the same thing. I also love the 2+2 mixer. It is my favorite of the mixers I've designed. And the Giraffe is essentially a 2+2 with attenuators. And a very strange normal, because you have the output of, or you have input of channel 1 normal to the input of channel 3. And I did that so it could also act as a mult, which I've used in numerous occasions. And the original idea was, well, you could patch into 1 and then patch into 2 and come out of 2, and you have one mix, and that's normal to there, so then you patch something else down here, or you just use as that pass-through attenuator for that signal. So I don't know, it made sense in my head. I feel like the mixer circuit has gotten about as complex as it can get at this point and still be useful. So I don't know how much more you could do with that before it just gets too complicated. You're like, oh, why is this mixer so complicated? What are the pink and green modules? Can't find them on Modular. Yeah, they're prototypes. There'd be this, yeah, Safari Series 2. This is a wave shaper. That's really selling this thing short, but it's a wave shaper, and the Snakes is a dual channel 16-step sequencer. I like that I can boil the description of the Flamingo down to a wave shaper, and that's really underselling that thing, but that's okay. This is, in the Voltage Lab 2, there are 2 entirely new oscillators, each one with wave shapers and wave folders and stuff that have never been used in synthesis before, that Michael's come up with, that are absolutely brilliant, and this is one of them. And this is part of one of them. It's not even the entire signal path for that oscillator, but it's part of it. And it was interesting enough that I thought it would make a good standalone module, because we wanted to test it. Then the second oscillator has something that's entirely different, just as interesting. That one, though, we're not gonna show anyone that one until the Voltage Lab comes out. So we figure there's got to be something to show, because we kind of are giving away the Voltage Lab quite a bit. Or by we, I mean me, obviously. But, I've shown quite a bit of it with the Flamingo and with the local florist. Well, I guess that's not really much of it at all, but it's 2 bits. talked about the sequencer a bit. I don't know. It's sort of its own beast. This Waveform's oscillator from years past, the unique oscillator, we're getting all the functionality in recent oscillators. Waveforms, there was 2 versions of the Waveforms oscillator. Was there? No, there wasn't. There was 1 version. Or was there? There may have been 2 versions. It's getting fuzzy. I would have to go back and look. If there was 2 versions, the first version used a oscillator chip that we purchased off of George Hearn. George Hearn has a great new synthesizer out and is doing some really, really cool stuff nowadays. But when we started out, we were buying oscillator chips off him because they were great oscillator cores, and they solved a problem we had, which was we didn't have an oscillator, we needed one. If we had 2 versions of the waveforms, that's what the first version was. If we didn't, then we had already moved on to our own core, which was developed by Nicol Johnson, our engineer. And it was the first generation of what has become our now ongoing oscillator core, which we've slowly evolved over the years, but the core has remained virtually the same. What the waveforms offered that was interesting was you had the blade wave, but you had the full implementation of the blade wave. So that gave you the ability to modulate it externally in really chaotic ways. And I haven't used that implementation of it since, I don't think, which is kind of a shame, because that to me was the really, really interesting bit of it, because you could get these crazy, dissonant, noisy, almost ring modi sounds out of it. And I haven't put that in ever since. The double helix has the blade wave, but it has the same implementation that the SV1B has, which is the more traditional implementation, the cleaner implementation, where it's just, it's sort of a complete blade wave and then you can just modulate it. Where in the waveforms, you could actually go in there and replace half of the source for it and create just chaos. So for that reason, the waveforms was an interesting oscillator, and it sounds good. It's the same core. It's just Gen 1. Yeah, so that's what that is. There was no, and we've used that because the oscillator to us sounds really good. And what it is, it's a sawtooth oscillator core that we then shape everything off of. Now, at this point, we've replaced probably most of those wave shapers with new ones because for various reasons we, sort of evolved what we needed downstream. But as a saw wave generator that tracks volt per octave and gives us an interesting sounding saw wave, I think it does a great job. If it doesn't track well, it needs calibrating. And if you shoot us an email, I know Perry has probably a canned response he can reply with the calibration procedures, so you can do it yourself. It's not hard. Or you can send it in and we'll do it for you. Not a problem. Then of course you have to send it in. Yeah, so that's that. I've just rambled on now for nearly 2 hours talking about building systems. And this is kind of what I've come up with. I don't know if my power... All right, I turned it on. I don't smell anything funny. I don't know where the outputs would go. Put one there and one there. It's nice that the SV1 has this built-in attenuator for the output, which comes in handy when you do something like this. That's one thing that the Voltage Lab doesn't have. Maybe what I'll do is just dedicate a channel of the Giraffe to doing that. Let's see if we can make a sound. See, every time they turn this thing on, all the channels are active. It's not there. Get a gate going. And a pitch. All right, we have a synthesizer that makes sound. So here's our sine wave coming out of the SV1 that's going into the Flamingo and into a VCA and into the output. That's kind of cool. We can modulate it, which probably makes it cooler. I like the little bit of tremolo there. That's nice. In trying these new circuits and these new ideas, the idea of... Can I get the scope out again for the oscillatorless Flamingo? But not today. But I could do that again. Because the Flamingo's really interesting, I think, to see on a scope and what it can do and how it... Because it is completely interesting, so it's completely unique, so it's difficult to show what it's doing without kind of the visual aspect, because you can hear it and it sounds interesting, but it's hard to... The flamingo is interesting because it's constantly fighting with itself, and that's sort of where the chaos comes from, is that it's simultaneously trying to destroy the signal and rebuild it. So it's always trying to compensate for what it's destroyed by guessing what it's destroyed and replacing it. And the sort of interesting bits come from how poorly it's able to reconstruct what it's taken away. So if I take out the modulation here, and we slide these sliders up all the way, there's virtually no original signal left. As you can see here, if we come out of the clipped output, you can barely hear anything. And yet, we can rebuild it, which is interesting. This gets really interesting with audio rate modulation. So if I take just an audio rate sine wave here, you can really go crazy with the audio rate modulation and it never loses pitch, which is cool. Out of there, maybe into the filter. You start to hear the power of this because we're using a sine wave. So typically, obviously, a sine wave's not going to have any harmonics to get hit by a filter, but now we have a lot of really interesting harmonics to hit this filter with. So that, I think, sounds really cool. Yeah, so I think I've built an interesting synthesizer here, I hope. Let's see, if we take the clock out of here and put it into here. So the clock for this is running this guy too. We'll take out one here, ping this, and we will run that, I guess, into channel 1 here. Oh, we're going to need a filter. Oh, there we go. percussive with this. So we'll keep it super, super short. Filter, pluck mode, super short response, a little bit of resonance. Yeah, it works nice. We can switch to low pass gate mode here. Make it nice and tight. I like triangle with the warp on for this oscillator. Let's do FM and ring mod too. There we go. I don't think I've given Snakes a full rundown yet, and the reason is I did go through it loosely. The reason I haven't gone super deep into it is it's not finished yet. There's still a few functions that I haven't coded. For instance, the bottom row here is the save, where you'll be able to save 16 patterns and recall them, and that doesn't do anything yet. But just about everything else works, which is nice. But like I said, I always save the saving bits for absolute last, because I don't want it. It's a pain in the butt if you're trying to clear out corrupt data every time you test something. So I always save that as the last step. interesting. Yeah, Snakes to me it's a, I've distilled down the percussion sequencer into the functions I found extremely useful, and then I've added bits that I thought it could take advantage of, like Euclidean pattern generation and some more generative stuff. So it's, and obviously I stripped out the VCAs and all that, which I never took as much advantage of as I probably should have. So I was able to slim it down to me, what is just a pure percussion sequencer. And 2 channels, you can, create 2 little voices with it and you're good to go. Sounds good. Is it okay to replace an old school ceramic disc cap that just says 20% on it with one that says plus 80 minus 20? Otherwise the same values. Yeah, as long as the power rating is okay, it shouldn't be a problem. Everybody needs a flamingo in their life. I think so. It's an interesting circuit. And I'm really looking forward to being able to describe it in maybe more musical terms. Certainly in the context of the Voltage Lab 2, it becomes a really interesting piece because it's just a piece of the signal chain in that oscillator. So yes, Snakes is just trigger gate outs. There's no pitch in there at all. Can you use Snakes in different time signatures? Yeah, well, you can set the length of it to any between 1 and 32. So, and you can clock it externally. So yeah, you have full control over what's going on. So that's kind of interesting. So what if we took, this is gonna get weird. What if we took the output of the delay into the florist? Chorus action. No, Brian, unfortunately not. But Sean Holt, hell of a performance tonight by Sean Holt. If you did like the music we were playing earlier, that was Sean Holt. His stuff's all available on Bandcamp. Go check it out. I'm a big fan. And Sean's a great guy, so even better. But I guess I could shut that off now. This sounds almost like steel drums. Obviously, I guess I could turn the definitely a steel drum vibe here. So this is, you know, sine wave through the flamingo, some filtering. If we open it up, this is what's coming through the flamingo. Audio rate modulation driving that. That's really interesting. It's just one of those modules I can play with for a long time. Sort of getting it, trying to figure it out. Do I think there's any truth to Perkins-Elmer optocouplers sounding better than X5/Cool Audio, or is it just people trying to hype new old stock for the sake of it? Are those Vactrol's style? Because there's a million different kinds. I don't know exactly what your internet argument you're talking about. I know the Vactrols that we use in the low-pass gate are not manufactured anymore by anybody. They were a different style that no one is currently making, which is sort of a bummer. I wish someone would, but no one is. So that sort of left us out of that. I've never used any of the other ones, so I can't really say with any knowledge if one is. My guess is new. In my opinion, new is usually better because you have better manufacturing capabilities. The problem with Vactrols is that they were terrible from the beginning. They were never good components. They were problematic from the start. So that's, you know, one of the reasons why when you buy 100 Vactrols, you know, you hope you can use 80 of them and you throw the other ones away, which sucks because they were like $7 a piece. But it kind of is what it is. The tolerances on them is horrible. Which is why when we engineered around them and created analog clones of them, we kind of went through and solved all those problems. You know, each one of our dynamics controllers sounds exactly the same, which is what you want. We can also vary the decay time with both a knob and with CV. So what we can essentially do is swap out an infinite number of Vactrols with infinite lengths to meet the purpose of the music at any point in time, which is something you can't do with the low-pass gate. So I would argue that there's better ways to do this now than Vactrols. Vactrols do have a magical sound, but you can get that sound other ways. You know, we've proven it with the dynamics controller that you can do it in other analog ways and get that same sound with additional features. That said, it, you know, it's kind of a cool thing. But between those two, I'm sure they both sound fine. I don't know. Just guessing. The sequence has gotten weird. Anyway, I think that's we've done this. There's an exciting patch right there. That's good. See, you can hear it. 2-step patch, no problem. We could pick something maybe super weird, dense Euclidean pattern here. That's good. We can modulate that with B here. We can pick a different. How is the kick working? I can talk about the kick. The kick's a cool little circuit. Let me turn this sequence off here. The kick is real simple, and I've talked about this before, but it's I'll even make it more simple for the sake of explaining it. I have this little sequence running here, which I can make much simpler. Turn off all these steps. So we have a gate signal coming into the low pass gate module. The low pass gate module is being patched into the ping input. You see I didn't screw down the module the whole way. That's fine. So we can use the frequency knob. And if you have a subwoofer right now, if you're listening to your phone, I'm sorry you can't hear any of this. If you have a subwoofer, you can hear the low end on this. So we have full resonance in filter mode, and we're essentially, I'll turn it down to explain this. What we're doing with the ping input is we're essentially taking this frequency and very quickly sweeping through self-oscillation, just like that. Except I can't do it as fast with my human fingers as the gate signal, so that's what you end up with. Now, and that output then of that goes into a filter here where I'm rolling off the high end. So if I open it up, this is the full signal that passes through, and it has that high end snap to it. Not always what you want in a kick drum. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. If you don't, I run it through a filter so I can roll that off. You can add a little resonance for fun if you want, but it's not necessary. With the Crow, I can add overdrive too, if I wanted. So that's the kick sound. It's super simple. And that's sort of I use that in almost every patch, in almost every video. When I do a kick, that's kind of what it is. You can turn down the frequency, make it nice and tight. You can open it up, let it bleed. And what you're doing when you let it bleed, essentially it never closes all the way. But you can find this sweet spot where it sort of rings out and you have that nice low end ring. Or you could just pull it in. That's good too. Yeah, if we listen to the high, you should just have the snap. I wonder if we take, now I'm thinking, we take this with, I don't know if this is going to work. It probably isn't going to work. It'll look ridiculous. Yeah, it didn't really work. Patch noise into the low pass gate. I was hoping for more of a snary thing, but it's failed. That's fine. Now it just sounds like a noisy kick drum. We can take that and patch in maybe a sine wave instead. Oh my God. There's some low end. Now I'm not using noise anymore. I've just patched in a sine wave instead. The noise is coming from the drive and the crow. Mix some noise with the ADSR and the kick into a mixer before the output. Great snare. Yeah, you're right, Yotis. That is a great snare. And this is, I was talking earlier about how Michael and I are working on a kick drum right now. And this is sort of what we're experimenting with, because if I take out the sine wave and we're listening to just the kick, what you end up with is, and let's turn off the overdrive so you can hear just this. What you end up with is, if you want to adjust the frequency of it because you want to tune your kick drum to the song, if you do, sometimes you don't, and that's okay too. But if you want to tune it, you can't do it because it's essentially all frequencies. Sorry if that was too loud, but it's essentially, we're only listening to the lower frequency, so it's not a tunable thing. So what we've been experimenting with is patching in an oscillator that you can then tune within about an octave. And that's all we need. It's a kick drum. But it can get really, really, really low, which is cool. So we've been experimenting with, a second oscillator and mixing and what those levels should be, because we don't want a million controls on the module. It should be as simple as this kick drum, sound, which is just this cool, here it is, super simple sound, but we want a couple more control points so that it is a little bit more flexible. So that's what we've been playing with, experimenting with, and I think we're just about there, hopefully. All percussion modules. Ugh. That means we have to do all the percussion modules. This stuff takes time. We only have Michael and I still have to, we have to make this stuff. We have to design it. Yeah, it's tough. Drum modules, if you try to build a percussion set, they grow so fast. So we are thinking about drum modules, percussion modules, really for the first time ever, because this stuff, I've always liked I liked building percussion out of a bunch of different modules, but I do see the benefits of individual modules that are, this is this, but they have to be flexible enough for me to feel comfortable using it, because I do, I don't want it to sound exactly the same every time. So we're going to play with it and see if we can come up with something interesting. I know, jeez, I'm so lazy. I spend all my time on the internet. I should be working. But that's kind of cool. So I wonder if let's take that. Let's do this. Take our kick into the X. and then our sine into the Y. Here's an experiment. Ring mod kick drum. So this is a standard ring mod orientation here. That's kind of interesting. It definitely hits hard. And then we can bring in that low back in. That didn't really do that, but that's okay. Switch the mode up here a little bit. Yeah, that's weird. I'm not sure this is the kick drum of the future, but it sounds interesting. I could see, if you're doing an industrial album, you need a weird kick. Yeah. There you go. The same module for all percussion modules, just slightly different internal routings. It's such a rat hole because we've been working on this, and what you find is you start out and you say, okay, if we want to do something that has similar UI for whatever reason. What you realize very quickly is it doesn't make sense. A kick drum has wildly different requirements UI-wise than, say, a percussion sound or a hi-hat or a snare sound. So it's been an interesting challenge. It's been fun because you take these little bits that you use all the time. Like I kind of patch up when I patch up a kick. It's usually the same kick every time. And when I patch up a hi-hat sound, it's typically the same type of hi-hat sound every time. So creating something based on those you'd think would be the simple way. Just take these 4 things and jam them together and you have a module. But what you realize when you do that then is you sort of paint yourself into a corner, and it ends up not being as flexible as it needs to be is if it's a standalone module. So for something like a kick drum, it can't just be this because this is one sound. It needs to have a palette to be interesting to me, to sort of deserve to be its own module. But we're working on it. We'll see. And kind of, you could sort of go down the line then and say that about anything. Like the hi-hat, you could say that about, like typically for a hi-hat, I'll go noise into a high-pass filter into a VCA and then modulate it with a voltage controllable envelope so you can get some variation. It sounds great. But what you run into then is that, well, it sounds like that every time. And maybe I want it to sound a little different. And then there's no way to do that. So it's been interesting experimenting and thinking about this stuff in that context and trying to find something that's that we can do that is interesting and flexible enough that you can use it in a lot of different patches. Yeah, I can't wait to use something like this with Herman. That'll be super fun. If you didn't see our live stream on Wednesday, I would go check it out. It was super dubby, but it was really, really fun. We did it from Herman's new studio, and we just had an absolute blast. I thought it sounded really, really good. Make it with a digital and a sample track. can't promise anything. But I will keep that in mind. If you know any DSP programmers, send them my way. There you go. That's cool. I think that's kind of neat. So I added the voltage lab back in as like a little hi-hatty thing. Do something on the off here. Maybe that doesn't work very well, but it was worth trying, wasn't it? I think it was. I know when it doesn't sound good, and that was one of those times. And that's all right. Let's go back to filter mode here. Maybe do something obnoxious. That's kind of obnoxious. Nice. I don't know. So anyway, it was fun to build this case tonight. Thank you for hanging out with me while I did it. I think I've now been on the internet for many hours. And it's time to stop. But anyway, thank you for tuning in and for watching me do this, whatever this was. I built a case and then I made a couple weird sounds just to make sure that it works, and it seems to work just fine. Let's see. I think now that the case is a little smaller, it should be a little easier. If I do a patch lab here, it should be a little bit easier to see. If I fill the whole screen. Yeah, look at that. Oh my gosh. It wants to be a patch lab. It's not going to be. But anyway, if anybody has a last minute question here before I go away, otherwise I think I'm going to call it an evening. I have a mess of modules all over the table here to clean up. You can see I've got a mess. I've got to clean it up. Over here, I've got modules and oscilloscopes. Oh my goodness. Running out of tea. So cool. That was great fun. Thank you for hanging out with me on Sunday evening. I'm going to clean up my mess here and call it an evening. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed, because I do this all the time, randomly, extremely randomly, as randomly as you can get. I usually I don't know that I'm going to go live until maybe 10, 15 minutes before I do, and I will put up notice on YouTube, and then I'll go live. I usually don't do any social media hyping of it, other than maybe when Herman and I perform, because I think that's a little bit more interesting, and Herman asked me to. But usually this is just, I do this when I can, and I'm glad that people want to hang out with me and chat with me, and that's kind of what it's for, is just to hang out and talk about synthesizers. So until I do it again, thank you everybody for tuning in, and I will see you guys another day. See you guys. Goodbye.